Hello everybody, this is Brian Eslick here from How To Automotive. Today I'm going to walk you through the steps of changing your front brake pads and rotors and sensors on your 2007 Mini Cooper S convertible here. We're going to start by removing both front wheels. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these anti-rattle clips. I'm just going to use a little flat blade screwdriver like so, put it in the corner of it, pry it out. Once you get one corner pried out, then you can just wiggle it out, set that aside. After that, we're going to remove, right on the back side of the caliper, there is a little dust boot cap that you're going to pull off. There's one on the top and one on the bottom. Right here. So we're going to pull both of those out. And now we're going to get a 7mm Allen. It's inside here, and we're going to take it out. So we're going to take our 7mm. These are called the caliper slide pins, and the calipers actually slide on these pins back and forth. And we're going to take the two of those out. So after taking the pins out, set those aside. Before we put these back in, we're going to put a little Seal Glide brake lubricant on these. I'll show you that in a minute. Now what we're going to do is these rotors, they get a big lip on them, so to get the pad off, they won't come off. So what you got to do is you got to take a flat blade screwdriver inside like so, and just give it a little pry like that. And what that does is it pushes the piston in a little bit. Now you're able to remove your caliper. And what I like to do is to set them up on top of the backing plate here. That way it doesn't put any stress on the brake hoses. So now that we got that done, remove this cage, caliper cage, and so we're going to remove these two bolts here. So after removing the two 16mm bolts that hold the cage on, we'll take it off and set it aside. The next step we're going to do is we're going to remove our brake rotor itself. We're replacing it. So we're going to take out this Torx here. So a lot of times this bolt here is held in with Loctite or thread sealer, so it's hard to get it out. So it's really easy to strip it out, the head out. So what I like to use is what they call an impact screwdriver. So used on this one, it was a T50 Torx bit. So you put it in like so, and you're going to hold it with one hand and twist in the counterclockwise rotation. At the same time, you're going to strike it with the hammer on the end, and that's going to vibrate and twist at the same time, this head loose. And then once it breaks free, you should be able to just spin it out by hand. So after striking it 3 or 4 times, it finally came free. So now you just take the little nut out. Now with one hand you want to hold the rotor, because as I'm taking it out, you can see it's getting really loose, and it'll fall off. So with one hand, catch the rotor as you take the nut off. Okay, after getting the rotor off, the next step is to take your piston here and press it back inside the caliper. And also this is the time when you want to inspect the boots and make sure there's no wear or tear on it. If there are, then the calipers probably need to be replaced, but this one's in good shape, so I'll show you some tool options for pressing these in. So one option for pressing the piston back in is to use a C-clamp like so. Now in some cases you may require to open the bleeder screw here and then turn it in to squeeze it in. I don't like to do that. I actually like to leave the bleeder screw closed, and when you do it, what it does is it forces the fluid back up into the master cylinder, and as the brake pads wear, the brake fluid drops. Well, right, so when you push the fluid, it actually just raises the brake fluid back up inside the master cylinder. So that's how I do it. So the way I do it, if you don't open the bleeder screw, just press the pistons back in. As long as they go in smoothly and slowly, you're okay, and you won't have to bleed the brakes afterwards. If you open this bleeder screw, you will have to bleed the brakes after you're done. Another option for getting the piston back in is a large pair of channel locks like so. And you just put them on there and give them the good squeeze. There is also an actual tool used to do this, but it looks kind of like this right here. This one's made for dual pistons, and they have one made for single piston. This is a single piston caliper, but But I have found that the dual piston caliper will actually, piston tool will actually work just fine compressing the, so as you squeeze this in, it pushes this rod towards the caliper and expands the, or pushes the piston in. So now that we got our piston pushed in, what we got to do is on the driver's side, it has a pad indicator warning sensor. So when this sensor, when this wears down, it makes this sensor turn the light on the dash to let you know that you need brakes. So we need to take this sensor out. So the way to do that, to start, is to pop the little cap that goes over the bleeder screw, pull that off, and then pull the little rubber boot off right here on that part. So after you get that popped off, what we need to do is we need to take a couple of these little screws out here that hold the inner fender well. Actually, we just need to take this one here, here, and here, and we're going to pry the fender well out of the way, and then it's going to give us access to our connection for the brake lining indicator. Okay, now that we got our fender lining loose a little bit, every couple of inches or so, there's one of these little clips. You just pop them off like so, and that frees the wire because it's tied to the ABS sensor. So that frees the wire off. So now we're gonna go into here and peel the. So what we're trying to do is get to the black connector here. The blue one is for the ABS. So what we do is we pop it out of this little perch here, and right there is a little button, like you just squeeze, push it in, and pull with two hands, pull it apart. So now that you got the wiring pulled out of it, what you do is take your brake pad and pry it out of the caliper, like so, and you can pull everything through. So now we're ready to start going back together. So what you want to do is unbox your rotors, your new rotors, and match them up with your old rotors to make sure they're the right part. And in my case, they're exactly right. So before we just go put them on, what I like to do is they come with like a little bit of oil or film on them to prevent them from rusting. So I like to spray them off with brake clean, or use soap and water and wash the rotors down before you put it on. And the other tip is once you get it washed up and clean, after that you want to try not to touch the surface. There's grease or dirt or anything like that getting on the surface like that is a real common reason why brakes will squeak right after you do a brake job. So I try not to touch the brake rotor itself, and I also try not to touch the surface of the new pad with my hands. So before we start reassembling, what I also like to do is I like to put a little blue Loctite or what they call thread sealer on the threads of the Allen bolt that holds the rotor on, and also on the 16mm bolts that hold the caliper cage on. And what this does is it helps prevent these bolts from vibrating loose and coming back off. So now that the rotor is back on, washed and secured with the bolt, it's time to put the cage back on. So we'll put this on and put our two 16mm bolts through. But just before I do, what I like to do is take a little wire brush, and in those little grooves right there where you can see the little rust spot, that's where the brake pads and stuff rides. I like to just scuff it with a wire brush, and then put a little bit of lube, caliper lube, on those so the pads have a little slide back and forth. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take our new brake, or inner brake pad, this is the one with the clips that look like this, and we're going to put our so we're going to push our little sensor in this little slot right here. And if you look at the sensor closely, it has a little nipple sticking out, and that nipple has to face the brake pad surface itself. So after we get that done, what we're going to do is we're going to put a little Seal Glide lubricant. This is optional. We're going to put a little lubricant on the back of the brake pad itself, and then we're going to fish it through the caliper and put this in the caliper. So this is that Seal Glide I speak of. It's just a silicone based lubricant, and you can get this at pretty much any parts suppliers. So you don't have to get the big tub like this. They actually sell them with little packages or whatever. Or you just ask your part supplier about the lubricant, caliper lubricant. So now we got the lube on the back of the pad. We're going to fish the liner pad indicator through the caliper like so, and then take the piston, the caliper, and put it in the brake pad, and put it in the piston of the caliper. So that's what it'll look like after you're done. So you put that there, and the next step is you can put a little of that Seal Guard grease on the pins itself, or you can put a little bit in the boot, like here and there. Okay, now you can put your outer pad on. Just slip it just slides on like so. Put that on and then put a little thin layer of the grease. And now your caliper itself is ready to slide over and be reinstalled on. So now that you got the caliper on, you're gonna put your slide pins back in. Make sure you got a little bit of grease on the pins and slide them in. So after getting your caliper pins, 7mm Allen's tightened back down, the next step is to put these caps back on. They go back on the back. They to prevent the dirt from getting inside the slide pins there, and keep it nice and clean so it won't freeze up on you. Now that we got that done, what we're going to do is we're going to route our lining cable here, sensor here, back into place and plug it in. Okay, after attaching our sensor wire back on and putting our clips back in the splash shield back on and putting it back in place, and that sensor just push together. You kind of twist it until they slide into the slot, and then you just push them together. Okay, now we got to put this anti-rattle clip back on, and this one can be a little tricky, but I found if you put it on the bottom first, like so, and hook it under the corner, and then hook the ear in here, and sometimes with your own hands you can pry it over like so, and it's on. Now you just, what you do is you get like a little something and you tap them in like that until they fully seat, and now it's on all the way. And the other side is pretty much the same. The only difference is you don't have the brake lining sensor. And the final step would be to put your wheels on, torque them down, and then pump your brake pedal before you drive it, and then take it for a nice test drive. And that's how you do the front brakes on your 2007 Mini Cooper S with the this one has the supercharger on it. And I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. I do respond. And I invite you to subscribe and follow me on Facebook at Facebook/HowToAutomotive. And I'd like to thank you again.